Check. as they journey from Mount Sinai
mientras ellos mueven del monte Sinaí
to the border of the Promised Land.
a la frontera de la tierra prometida.
All right, we welcome you to what's going to be a good night tonight. We appreciate you being here. This was an exciting trip, so we're looking forward to hearing about it. We welcome you here. We hope that there are some people from Mexico that are able to watch this. So if you're watching this, obviously via the internet, we thank you for being with us tonight. I'm not going to talk for very long because you didn't come to hear me. You came to hear about what God did through these people in Mexico. So let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father, thank you for the fact that you work not only here in Tonganoxie and Leavenworth County, but you work all around the world. And it's amazing what you did during this trip, and you continue to do there. So we thank you that you work here in Mexico, in Nicaragua, in Asia, all across the world. We thank you that you're the God of all nations, and that when you return, every tribe, tongue, and nation will worship you around the throne forever and ever. Tonight, we're excited to hear about what you've done, and we pray it all in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Scott, I hear a little bit of feedback on my microphone already. I turned it up. Can you pass that down to between Ann and Jill? We're excited to share everything that we experienced in Mexico, and we also want to answer any questions that you may have. So just a couple of real quick housekeeping things. We have two ways for you can ask questions. The first is you can text in your messages. If you want to do that, you can write down this number. The slide won't always be up, but it will be up frequently, so you can text in questions, and I will receive them here on my iPad. The other way is the good old-fashioned raise your hand. I might not call on you, but I will try to make eye contact with you and acknowledge you so you can put your hand down, and then whenever it's a good time to ask questions, I will call on you. So our goal tonight is to share the incredible ways that God moved while we were in Mexico. My prayerful hope by the end of this service is, one, that you'd be encouraged, that you'd be inspired and uplifted by the stories that we have to tell, which are ultimately a testament of God's faithfulness. Two, that you'd be convicted, that you would feel a calling to either embark on a missions trip yourself or to support others to go on a missions trip. And number three, that you'd be emboldened, that you would leave here with the conviction to live every moment of every day for the glory of God. Our journey in Mexico began with the setup of the clinic. So it was on that day that God started revealing something to us, that he was going to work in some remarkable way. And as you saw in the opening video, Luraya was just a small little village in the middle of nowhere, really. It was at the end of a very challenging road. Now, our group traveled in multiple vehicles. One of those vehicles was a minivan, which could not go down that road. So we needed some assistance, and the local police department was more than happy to provide that assistance. Now, on these pictures, you see some of us pretending like we're getting arrested. They were pretty funny, and it brings even more laughter when you realize that the county jail is actually in Luraya. But just the fact that the city provided their police officers was a testament to God's faithfulness, and we'll talk a little bit more about the city's involvement later. But God was teaching us something important. We didn't know what that something was on that first day, but he was teaching us something, and we needed, on this first day and every day, we needed a ride to the clinic, and God was faithful to provide it. Now, as we arrived at the clinic site on the first day, this is what we arrived to. We were prepared. We were greeted by the most welcoming people I think you could meet. The warm-hearted citizens and residents of Luraya, and also high-ranking officials in the county. And I had the privilege of representing our group and accepting a generous gift from them You'll notice in the pictures this giant fruit basket, which literally took two of us to carry. It was very heavy, but I had the privilege of accepting that, of being welcomed, of accepting their welcome on behalf of the group. But from the moment our feet touched the ground, there was this atmosphere of a joyful anticipation. Again, we didn't know what to expect, but we were eagerly anticipating something, even from that first day. And I share this story to lay the foundation for a story that I'll tell at the conclusion of the service for why we believe this clinic turned out the way it did. Now, before we move on, does anybody have anything they'd like to share regarding that first day, that setup day at the clinic? Okie dokie. So what I'd like for us to do now is, actually, I'm not ready there. So our first day was a Wednesday. So that was our setup day. So that made our first clinic day be a Thursday. And we arrived to the clinic at 7:30 a.m. And when we arrived at the clinic, this is what was awaiting us. There were around 85 people waiting in line before we even got there. There was 84 people waiting for us to be there. Some of them had been there for 2 hours, and some of them had traveled over 3 hours to get to that line. So you can do the math about what time they woke up and start their journey. They traveled long distances. They traveled. They got there early for a pair of free glasses, for something that we often take for granted here in the States. I have terrible vision. If I take my glasses off, everything is completely blurry. But I've had glasses all of my life. We saw many people who had vision far worse than I did in their 70s and their 80s. I think we had one lady who was 94 who had never had a pair of glasses. We saw many people just in desperate need, and that paved the way for some pretty extraordinary stuff, which we want to share with you now. In just a moment, we're going to start passing the microphone down. But before we do that, I want to kind of give you an understanding of the clinics, kind of explain the order of operations. So when attendees arrived, they had to follow a pretty strict path. First, they had to go through registration. That's pretty self-explanatory, right? And then they proceeded to the vision chart, followed by the eye refraction test. Then they would go to the eyeglass fitters, where they would receive their pair of eyeglasses. And then lastly, they would see the evangelism team. And so what I want to do is kick things off. I want to hand the microphone over to Robert and Afton. Robert first. These two gentlemen were at the vision chart. Now, Afton was their part of, Afton kind of jumped places, but I'm sticking you in this location for this. Robert, could you explain what your role was at the vision chart and then any stories that you want to tell?
Sure. So what I was doing was, you have the vision chart where the E's go each way. So I just had my little stick there, and I point, and I got the chance to see almost everybody come through. So we had two different components of it. We had the medical, and then we had the vision. So everybody that came through the vision, either me, Afton, or Chris, we were able to, they just came through, and we were able to point through the chart, just go through it, which way, and they point. And you could kind of see where sometimes they stay back, the 20 feet, but then if they couldn't see anything, they'd come up 10 feet, just walking through those different things. And where I was kind of at a distance, so I didn't get to really speak to anyone individually as much. I kind of got to see overall, and just an overall view of everybody, and just how the whole clinic, everybody just was working together. The cooks, and you saw the picture there when we got there, the village, just the whole village, everybody was just really chipping in just to focus on one thing, just to glorify God. And we just had a purpose there and just to serve. And it really took me back a lot. And for me, there wasn't really one aspect that stood out to me. It was just more, and God was really working on me, and it really helped me to refocus where I am with my life. And Larry Mary, he shared a verse with us. It was Luke 12:48, and it's like, from everyone who is given much much is expected. And I just look at, our lives, and, we are so blessed with what we have, just the medical things that we have, the conveniences that we have. And it just kind of made me look at where I am. It's just like refocus and re-examine where I am with my walk with God. And it really spoke to me a lot. And I'm now at the point where I'm trying to reorganize my life to my career, just my life in general, to where God's calling me and not the other way around, and fitting God in, how he could work with me. But I need to really refocus, and, so it's just, I've been to other mission trips in Mexico and stuff, but just this one, the people that I got to speak with, it's just like, man, you just see God so much through them, and just the joy and just the love, and it's just, it was awesome. So I'm just really looking forward to going back, and just so many people, I met, and, I love them so much. So it was really just a special thing, and it's just the way God is working on all of us, and just through me and helping me refocus. It's just, it's just kind of, I'm ready to get back there.
So as Nathan kind of said, I ended up hopping around quite a bit. I started off working with Colby and Bree on the refractors, but I quickly became sort of an all-purpose worker. I pretty much ended up in every place except the medical and evangelistic side. I spent most of my time doing exactly what Robert said, helping with the eye charts. But I had some thoughts that I wanted to share with you all. The Spirit of God was felt in and through our group in a mighty way over the course of our trip. We were granted the joys of fellowship day in and day out with our brothers and sisters in Christ, serving our great God alongside each other and submitting to God's will, that we would proclaim his word to the lost. I expected God to produce fruit through our efforts, but he far exceeded my expectations. When told the number of professed lives given to Christ through our efforts, my soul was flooded with joy and awe at the reality of God's power on display. To be able to experience the joy of praying with people, serving them, and allowing them to look beyond our hands to the God who is working through us was a perspective-changing experience. Fulfilling the Great Commission, both domestically and abroad, is both necessary and possible.
All right, so after the eyeglass vision chart, folks would be directed to the refractor, the eye refraction test, in which case Colby and Bree were in charge of that. So could one of you explain what you did, and then you guys can share whatever stories you'd like to share.
Do I turn it on? It's already on. Okay. So I was on the side of the refractor, and basically what I did is it's a machine and it scans the eyes. So I would scan both eyes, and then that would give a prescription for the person. And then it got sent over to Colby, who was working the computer that had a program. Do you want to tell them about that?
So it just had this program. So once she sent it would read their prescription, it'd send it over the computer, and then the program had the listing of 5,000 pairs of glasses that we had on hand, and it would read the closest prescription that would fit them the best, and then it would get so worse and worse, so on. It had an algorithm on there that you could manipulate the prescription, so it wasn't going to be exact, but it would give them something close, and it just got worse the more desperate you were to find them a pair of glasses. So you just do the best you can trying to get them a list. And I think some lists they would print out 2 or 3, and then sometimes you'd have 15 pairs of glasses that could match their sight. As for any particular stories, I just remember this one older lady. We didn't have a translator at our station, so the closest thing we had was Guatemala, and that was his family that was on the screen a second ago. We learned a little bit of Spanish to be able to talk with him, but this one lady came through, and we had read her eyes, and all I remember is when she got up, we were telling her in Spanish that we were thankful for being able to serve her, and I don't know what she was saying, but she was just pointing to the Lord and breaking down and praying, and she was so excited. And that memory will just stick with me forever.
A story that I had was of an elderly woman, and she was overjoyed with the chance to get glasses, and it was because for the first time she was going to be able to see her grandchildren.
So I was part of the eyeglass fitters team, which would have been the fourth stage if you're counting registration as stage one. So by the time they get to us, they have gone through registration and they've gotten this sheet of paper. They've taken that sheet of paper to the eye vision test, to the chart test, and then the Robert Nafton and Chris, when he was on the vision chart, would write down a preliminary, here's what their sight is, and then they would get a printout from Colby and Bree, and they would bring all of this to me. And then we're taking this information, and we've got eyeglass pullers who are going back and pulling eyeglasses, usually 5, 6 at a time that we start trying until we find that perfect pair. Sometimes we might have to go through 10 or 15 pair of glasses until we find the one that actually helps. Sometimes it's the first pair, and sometimes it's the very last pair, and sometimes we don't find one, so we send them back to Colby and Bree to do it again, and they come back with a new list. I have one silly story to share before several of us then speak. A little boy came and saw me. Actually, I'm going to show you this picture. This is him. He came and he didn't have a receipt from Colby and Bree. He only had the eye chart, and it said 20/20 vision. And I tell you what, this little boy said he couldn't see his palm in front of him by his exaggeration. So okay, well, we'll try some readers, and we started out small. We did a plus 0.25, and we put them on them, and I tell you what, you could see that there was just something wrong, because you could tell his vision just immediately got worse as we put these glasses on. So we gave him a pair of SPs, which means there's nothing but glass, but they don't know that. And I tell you what, as soon as we put those glasses on, he could see the teeniest, tiniest rock way down at the bottom of the hill, no problem. And this was him, and that brought us a lot of joy. So yeah, the desperation was real there. So what I want to do, there were several of us who were eyeglass fitters. Liz, Chris was in that area, Jill, Mary and Alex, and Gordon. And so I'm going to start with Liz. Liz, do you want to tell your stories?
So there's a couple of ladies that, the picture up there now, the lady bending over the table was Patti. She was my interpreter, and she was incredible and wonderful. We had a real good chance to get to know one another. Being able to sit with some of the people and just kind of hear some of the things, like Nathan talked about, people coming, for long distances and waiting all day in line. There was one woman that came, and she was talking about that she had taken 3 different buses that took over 6 hours total to get to us. So just desperate need in this area of simple eyeglasses that, like you said, we take for granted here. We don't think twice about it. The other thing that I found really interesting was the amount of older indigenous people who would come and visit, and we would have, someone, it was always an older person come and sit, and they would have their interpreter because they needed their indigenous language translated into Spanish, so then Patti could then translate the Spanish back to me in English. So it was, with some people, it was very much a process, but it was incredible to hear some of their stories. And, like Bree said, I had several that, would make the comment that they just want to be able to see their family. They want to be able to see their grandchildren. For the women, a lot of them, they wanted to be able to see their sewing so they could continue to make a living, different things like that. So it was extremely impactful and eye-opening, and like Robert said, just really makes you rethink your whole perspective on things. So.
So I started off at the eye charts and then moved over to the tables. So for me, my job was to make Nathan's job as easy as possible, to make that go as quick as possible. It is overwhelming when you try to think of all the different moments and all the different stories. You try to be there, and you want to capture it. But there was one moment, I think the woman, she put on these glasses, and I was lucky enough that since Nathan was talking and they were communicating, I was able to capture this moment where she put these glasses on, and you could just see her light up, and you could see the smile in her face, where she could see, and I was able to capture that moment. But there were so many people where this look and this light and this sparkle was on so many different people's face, where you could just tell that they could see, and there was it was so hard to explain that what we saw. And then the other thing, and there'll be a lot of stuff that I'll forget, but how many people after they got their glasses would then sit for 45 minutes or an hour to wait to then hear the gospel after the fact. Even though they waited all that time ahead of time, went through the entire process, they then waited after the fact. And I know there's other stuff that I'm forgetting about. What else did I mention to you, Nathan? I apologize. Oh, and like Liz said, to see the indigenous people and to see that language of them speaking, going to interpreter, to then come to us. It was. There was one more, the guy in the cowboy hat. Oh, the gentleman in the cowboy hat. So that was back when I was at the eyeglass chart. He was one of the people. He could not see. I get Edgardo and Eduardo confused. Was this Edgardo? Ubaldo, excuse me. So he started off at the 20-foot mark. He could not see anything. And he walked up. He didn't have a cane. He did not have a helper. He did not have anything. And they asked him, step closer, step closer. Literally, he was waving his hand in front of his face, and the guy's like, I can't see any of that. And this gentleman came all on his own. And then when he came over to, because I moved from the eyeglass chart over to the table. When he came over to the table, he was at Liz's table, and his sight was 200 over 200. It was just, it broke my heart, and I was so thankful that we were able to be there at the same time. And then rolling, again, forgive me for going on, rolling through the pictures, there's that lake all the way around. There were people that, to get there to us, canoed and ferried across and just paddled their way across in a canoe to come to see us multiple times throughout the day.
Jill, do you want to share?
Hit the button.
Okay, so I was one of the fitters, and a couple different stories that I'd like to share. On day 2 of the clinic, I had a woman, probably in her 20s, possibly 30s, come and visit with us. And at the end, once she got her glasses, I asked if I could pray with her. And she, of course, said yes. And during the prayer, she started crying. And through my interpreter, I was able to understand that she was saying that everyone in her home was believers. And I don't think that she was crying sad tears. I think they were very happy tears. And by the time it was all said and done, I ended up getting up from the table and embracing her, and we were both crying by the end of it. It was a very nice moment. Another moment was I had the opportunity to serve a 98-year-old woman and get her a pair of glasses, so that was very nice for her to be able to see. I'm pretty sure she was the oldest person we actually helped during our week there. And just one other thing I'd like to share, my interpreter, his name was Juan, his wife's name is Eloisa. They have a couple of kids, and since I've come back, I've actually been in contact with them every single day through Facebook Messenger. So we've built quite the bond and plan to stay in contact with them. So.
Robert, do you want to share on behalf of your kids?
Yeah, so Mary just started a new job, so she was hoping that she'd be able to get off in time and share, but she's unfortunately still working, so I got what she sent, so I'm going to kind of read what she wanted to share with the team. During the second day of the clinic, I was feeling a little bit down, thinking to myself, why did I go on this trip? Am I even helping? We gave out a lot of special glasses, we were having trouble with the translator, and other little things were making me feel pretty down. Then this very old woman came up to our table, and we tried the first few pairs off the pick list, but it wasn't helping her at all. Then we tried another pair from the pick list, and her face lit up, and we could see her doing and she has little emojis going, which way the hands were going. That thing, because she could read the eye chart, even without the translation. Yet we could see this pair really helped. And when it came time to circle the pair from that list that worked, we couldn't find it because it wasn't on the list, and I had accidentally chosen the wrong pair. I realized that these things don't really happen on accident, and that God was doing His work. And that, and after that, I just saw how Mary transitioned. Where at first, this being for Alex and Mary, this is their first time out of the country, and they were struggling a little bit at first. But then, as I saw them grow, it was really special for me because I could kind of see them, and now they're even willing to go back there, and just Mary's looking forward to it, and it just this thing's been a blessing. So God's good.
Gordo?
I started out in the refractor, but we had two refractors, and one of them doesn't work above 90 degrees. Which means it never worked. It's hot. Those pictures don't show you how hot it is. The Americans were sweating and wiping their brows. The Mexicans were sweating and wiping their brows. It was hot. And so you've got a very hot place, people wait in line for literally hours and hours and hours. Not a single complaint, nobody grumbling, nobody complaining that somebody jumped in line from them. They just waited. And they were in their Sunday best. And they came to be with us and to do those things. I had the opportunity to bunk with Larry and Mary. And, we got off the main discussion of glasses. And two of the main reasons that were there were to make a statement for the church that they were trying to plant there. That Americans thought enough of this church to be there. And it made a real impression on the community. And then the other thing is that my colleagues up here, a lot of these have never been to a third world country, and there was some serious eye-opening. You see pictures up there of them preparing the food. There was not a single kitchen that prepared our food that had a regular floor. It was dirt floor, thatched roofs, everything made by hand. The two chickens that were out in the yard on day one were dinner on day two. So it's a very rural, and they're giving us their absolute best that they've got, and it was really wonderful to be with those people.
So after the eyeglass fitters, like Chris said, they would wait in line to see the evangelism team. The evangelism team is made up of the local church that we're partnering with to help. As Liz talked about, that we all had translators. Sometimes we had multiple translators, so it was very beneficial to just have the Mexico team do the evangelism. We met a very real need. We helped prepare the way for the evangelism team to share the gospel. Now, I did have the pleasure of serving on the evangelism team with a translator. I got to see 3 people, and Liz mentioned sometimes working with 2 translators. For 2 of my 3, I had to work with 2 translators. So it took a long time to share the gospel, speaking it in English to somebody who could speak it in Spanish, to somebody who could speak it into in the native dialect, and then all the way back around. But it was a pleasure to be able to serve in that role, and yet it's also a good thing that the Mexicans were primarily serving in that role. So that was kind of the eyeglass clinic. Does anybody have anything they want to share regarding the eyeglass clinic, Afton?
I just wanted to say, for anyone who might be curious, that dialect that was being translated to from Spanish, I believe was called Chinanteco. So.
There was several.
Oh, there
was actually 4,
oh,
maybe
wow.
5.
I'm still learning new things.
So Giovanni, if you're watching online, I think Giovanni said that there were up to 100 or more dialects in Oaxaca. And they're all different, and they don't relate to Spanish at all. So that was kind of the eyeglass clinic portion. We also had a medical clinic portion with Ann, Bill, Carly, and Josiah. I'm going to pass it to Carly first because she was the first to see the patients, correct?
Yeah. Yes, I was the first to see the patient as the nurse, the only nurse I think that happened to be down there this time. I would have the patients come to my little that's me eating street corn, I don't know. It was fun, but not a part of the clinic. I had, the first day of our clinic was set up in the school library, which we just took the shelves where they had books and made that where we had all the medication that we brought down with us. Each patient would come in to see me. I would take a history for them. The things we saw were wide-ranging. We saw infants to the elderly. We saw basic childhood diseases to advanced end-stage kidney failure. We saw pregnant people. We treated many people for just common pain. I would assess them. I would kind of triage them, decide which of the healthcare providers would be kind of best for them to see if there were some cases that were a little bit different. And then I would take blood pressures, just do basic vital signs. I had an assistant that helped me with the blood pressures and one that helped me with the blood glucose. I did not realize that in Mexico, especially in the region that we were in, there is a high, very high incidence of diabetes, which often goes untreated simply because they do not have the funding to take the medications, to buy the medications that they need. And most people understand that with type 1 diabetes or type 2 diabetes, you often have heart disease that then goes along with it, which is another problem that the population dealt a lot with. So I would kind of then disperse them. I will tell you that I believe, and Nathan can tell me these numbers, I think over the course of the 2.5 days that we did clinic, we saw about 230 people?
Around that. I have the exact number that'll come up.
Okay, so I had 230 people that I just did assessments on and then farmed out to either see Bill or Ann over the course of those 2 days. We loved every moment of it. I had families come in with their husband and wife, children, and their dog and their cat that would sit under my table while I was doing assessments. I had chickens walking around me sometimes when I was doing my assessments. I definitely had children. I brought a giant sack of lollipops, which Bill kind of was like, I don't think you need those. But they were pretty popular, and he used them to bribe some kids too. So anyway, I think it's people need to hear about the love of Jesus, but they need to know that you love them, and sometimes you can love them so well by meeting a need. And these people, they often could not meet that need on their own, so we were able to do that for them. And I hope that by getting those basic medical needs met, they were then more open to hearing the gospel and about Jesus in their life. So.
All right, I'm going to ask Bill to speak next, and I think you were going to talk about the doctor that we worked with. A question that we got is, how did the medication meet up with us for the clinic?
Okay, one of the things I think God showed me a lot, stretched my faith even before we went down there, because I was planning on going to the eyeglass clinic, and Larry said, but you're a doctor, so hey, why don't you do a medical clinic? And I was like, okay, I could do that, but I've never done that before, which long ago, I hadn't done it. I used to go on mission trips in college, but it's been 29 years since I was last on a missions trip. And I'd always gone into medicine saying that we would be able to use that someday to do medical missions, and I just had never done that. So when Larry asked me, I said I would be willing to do that, but I have no idea what I'm doing. And he was like, oh, it'll all work out. And there was a doctor that I had worked with as a medical student long ago who has a clinic in Mexico that he does twice a year and has done it for 30 years. And he was like, this will be great. And he's in the same state. He's like, oh, you're going to love it. It'll be great. Don't worry about it. God's going to take care of everything. And I was like, okay, well, I was a little stressed. I don't stress a lot, but I was stressing about this a little bit because I started reading that it's illegal to practice medicine down there without a license. And everyone's like, oh, no, it's not a problem. And I'm like, I need to figure out how to do it. And Larry said, don't worry. I started reading, and I read somewhere that if you had a Mexican doctor who was overseeing you, then you could practice under their license. And I said, okay, well, Larry's like, let me check on that. And he calls me back and goes, we got a doctor. And I communicated a little bit with Dr. Griselda. She didn't speak any English. We tried Google Translate, and we communicated a little bit. But I said, well, that's great. We need to know how to order medicine. And we went through this whole thing trying to figure that out. And I had no idea how to order medicine. And Larry calls me and goes, I just found some guy. He's worked with other medical clinics. He knows a pharmacist in Mexico City, and if you tell him what they want, he'll ship it all there. And so we went through the list. I got on a three-way phone call with Giovanni and Larry. No, actually Giovanni first, and then Giovanni didn't know, so Larry gets this other Diego guy on the phone with me. I've never met Diego, but he says, oh, it'll be great. Just tell us how much money you want to spend, and I'll talk to the guy. And we had this list, and 2 days later, I get a picture of this pallet of medicine that's sitting at Giovanni's house that they got delivered. And then the hospital calls and says, hey, we'd like to donate the money to pay for some of this trip, which was out of the blue. And so the hospital ended up paying for the medicines. And it was just watching God bring it all together that was really...
By hospital, we mean LMH.
LMH, Lawrence Memorial Hospital, where I work for, donated $2,000 for the medical supplies and the medicines, which was great. Other than that, when I got down there, I felt like I was watching... I think the frustrating thing for me is, for me, I was glad people came. I felt like we were able to do so little for them physically, and the things we did, I could give them some medicine. I could help their back pain for a day or two. I could treat an infection. Well, these people would work 90 to 100 degrees every day, and they were working 12 hours a day in a field without any kind of machinery. They had machetes, and they would come in and say, but my back hurts really bad, and I have a bad headache at the end of the day. And I was like, well, you're working at 100-degree temperatures for 12 hours, bent over with a machete. Yeah, hand planting corn and sugar cane. So, but the fact that God brought me there, and it was just amazing to be able to use my profession. Not that I was changing anybody's lives permanently. I did some things to help some people, but it was, if God used me to bring people to Him, it was the evangelists that were doing all the work. And Ann and I got stuck back in the back corner where we were locked in these little hot rooms all day, so we didn't get out and interact with people a lot of times. But there were some things I got to do. I got to help a lady. She'd had a lipoma on her chest for 20 years, she said, and it was going to cost her $800 or $900 American to get it done, and she just didn't have the money to do it, and we were able to take that off. So there were some nice things like that we got to do, but all of the stuff physically, that doesn't matter. It was the spiritual need that they had. So if God could use us to meet some physical needs so that he could reach people for their spiritual needs, that's what was really neat. And to watch him arrange all that was amazing.
So another question, and I'll let you answer it first, and then Ann, if you have another response, fine. What is one diagnosis that you saw the most of, and what resources would they have had locally to meet that need?
I would say back pain and diabetes were the two big ones. And they do have some clinics down there. There is medicine, but these people make the equivalent of about $9 a day. And they can get medicine fairly inexpensively, but it may cost them $4 or $5 a month for medicine, which is cheap for us, but when you're making $9 a day and 7 or 8 of that goes towards your food, there's not a lot of money left over for medicine, so that was a big thing.
Yeah, kind of on the heels of that. One of the things too, so medicine may have been available, cheap enough for most people to get pain medicine, and that, I agree, would be the thing we saw the most, was pain. But there was still, a lack of understanding on even how to use basic medicine. So we would go through our interview, and they would say, yeah, I have pain here and there, and we'd say, well, what have you tried? Nothing. Sometimes for years, they had not even tried Tylenol, even though that would be something they could get at a local clinic or a nurse station, very inexpensively. So we would say kind of health literacy was pretty low. People just didn't know how to interact with even over-the-counter medicines. So yeah.
Oh yeah, and they eat a lot of corn and drink Coke every night for dinner, so there's a lot of diabetes. I was going to say one of the things that I thought was really amazing was Dr. Griselda. I didn't know her when she first said, she said she would come and she would show up the day we got there to set up. That would probably be the only time we saw her. And then she had her clinic off. It was an hour and a half, 2 hours away, so she wouldn't be around. So I didn't know what to expect. When we got there, she came and she introduced herself and said hi. Her nephew was my translator. He was a medical student. He's a third-year medical student, which was really great because I could look at him and say, okay, well, they have this. Explain what you need to do, and he could kind of take it from there, which worked out great. What I saw was how he got so excited about what he was doing, and one of the things he told me, he says, I always thought I wanted to be a doctor, but I've never had any experience with actually seeing patients. Now I know I want to be a doctor and use this to serve God. So that was amazing. And Dr. Griselda, I don't know, she must have enjoyed what we were doing because she ended up showing up, I think, every single day, even though she said she wasn't going to, and it was like a 2-hour trip for her. So got to spend some time talking to both of them, and it was really fun.
Bill, I think they want to hear about your pregnant patient.
Well, this lady showed up, and she said, I think I'm 9 months pregnant, through a translator. I think I'm 9 months pregnant. She came an hour by canoe, but she wanted me to check to see if the baby was coming that week and tell her how far along she was. And she didn't want me to do any kind of real sensitive exam. She just wanted me to kind of feel, and I measured the baby, but it's been a little while since Josiah was the last baby I delivered, so.
Bill, you should go ahead and tell them you were sweating bullets.
Oh yeah, I was a little nervous because someone had asked me before we went down there what would happen to do what would they do if I had to deliver a baby. I said, well, I'd figure it out, but. I went to measure the baby. I could tell her she wanted to know if the baby was breech, and she wanted to know if it was coming anytime soon. And I measured her, and the thing is, I got a piece of string, and then I went and used the tape measure to measure her. But I kind of remember, they're just so small. I'm used to like normal-sized American women, and you can kind of measure about a centimeter per week. I didn't know how to translate that when the person's only like 4'8" to like. But I figured she was probably pretty close, and the baby was pointed in the right direction, so I reassured her, and she was happy. And this was her 5th baby. She said, I went and saw a midwife a couple of weeks ago, and she told me that she thought I was going to be due anytime. And I started asking her about, well, have you had any contractions? And she didn't know what those were. So went through the translator, and I asked her if she'd ever had any pain, and she said, well, yeah, when they had the other babies, it started hurting. And I said, did it come more and more frequently? And she's like, yeah. And I said, okay, those are contractions, and when they get to be about every 5 minutes, that means you're probably getting ready to have the baby. She's like, okay, well, I haven't had anything like that yet. So, but she had 5 babies at home. I said, well, who do you have deliver it? And she said, oh, my family.
She had never seen a doctor.
Yeah, she'd never seen a doctor for. I said, well, when did you think you got pregnant? She's like, I don't know. I've just.
Because she was still nursing.
She was still nursing, and so she hadn't started having any regular cycles, and so she just felt a baby kick one day, and she said, oh, I must be pregnant.
Another question, what happened? What did we do with the leftover medicine?
So right now, the leftover medicine, we left it with the family, Alida and Uvalda and Giovanni, and they had something. Alida had a plan for like every month for the next 2 years of how she was going to do missions work, and one of the things that she was doing was working with some pharmacists down there to give medicine away to people. And she was all excited that we had leftover medicine. She had a plan to start distributing it. Now, it had enough of an expiration date on it that we could use it again if there's any left over and we go back down there. But she said, oh no, I know this pharmacist and he has this mission. He gives medicine out to people, and she was all excited to get ready to deliver that medicine to him.
Some supplies that we had to use
Yeah.
next time, like kind of consumable things, but not oral medication.
Scalpels and sutures and stuff.
Anne, you want to share any of your stories?
Yes. Okay, so I guess I'm going to take it off a little bit off the track. But I do have one story to share. So one of the things that was really important to me, just on a personal level, I'd done a couple trips before just as a nurse, and with another church that did not have any interaction with the local church in Mexico. We were in Nicaragua, actually, but we went with the church, but for some reason they just didn't collaborate. And that was a piece that I really missed, because I felt like, here we are coming and doing a service and doing some good, but really it's the people on the ground, the people that are there, that speak the language, that know the culture, that are really able to maintain these relationships and, do the real work. And so one of the things that I very much looked forward to was the fact that we were collaborating with a local group of believers. And I don't know if I may be stealing something from later, but the way that they identified this village was that there was a church plant that was trying to get started there. And I think they had about 6 or 10 believers that had been meeting for a while with a pastor that was traveling in to try and get this church started. And one of the things that I appreciated so much was Larry, our leader, anytime that he addressed, or we all stood in a circle, many of the days we would start the day by standing in a circle and praying, and he would address the group. And one of the things he never failed to do was give the credit back to the local pastor that was starting the church plant, saying, thank you so much to the local church, I can't remember the name, for bringing us here, for bringing this clinic here, so that really the credit for all of the work that was happening in the clinics was going to the local church planter, and all the people that were being served were really being pointed back to him and the church, where they would hopefully follow up with and find a connection with. And one of the moments where I really felt like that became very real to me was I was seeing a younger woman. She was maybe in her upper 20s or 30s, but I know she had a child, at least one child, and she told me, she came in with something like left-sided facial numbness. And, of course, then you kind of go go through your interview and you say, well, you're having other neurological problems, anything else on one side of the body or any other neurological changes. And they were all normal. She didn't have anything else. And as I was talking to her, I asked her, when does this happen? And she said, well, it happens when I get very stressed, when my brother comes home after drinking a lot. He would come home and he would be very angry, and he would, I can assume, was becoming violent. She wasn't super forthcoming about all those details, but you could kind of read into the story. There was a lot of fear in these moments, and she would have these symptoms come up. So, sitting there with our antibiotics and our ibuprofen and Tylenol, medically there wasn't anything that I could do for her. I could kind of eliminate a few things, but to be able to say to her, and what I ended up doing was basically encouraging her to go back to the pastors out there. We did talk a little bit just about, talk therapy. Can you find somebody close to you, a family member that you can talk to about your stress? But I said, if you don't have anybody, a family member that you can do that with, there's a church planter here, there's a pastor here that you can meet with, or people in the church that can meet with you, that can talk to you about this problem and get some help. And that was where it really, became real for me, that I'm doing something, but I'm passing these people off to the local believers. And one of the, before I went, I actually felt a little, this is the first time too that I'd done, other than a nurse, had been on a mission trip. I was a little bit nervous about what am I gonna find? What are we gonna see? Tropical diseases that I don't know anything about. I was just kind of feeling nervous, and I called a friend of mine who's been on many, many missions trips and with a doctor, with a medical team. And I called this doctor in Louisiana. He gave me their phone number. And his name was Dr. Bill, actually. And Dr. Bill from Louisiana told me, I got to pick his brain a little bit. And I said, what should I expect? And he said, you need to remember that you're there to draw a crowd. You're there not because you're fixing these problems necessarily, but you're there because people will come and then they will hear the gospel, because the church the believers there will preach the gospel to them. And I'm like, oh, of course, of course. You know that, but you kind of forget it. But that was good for me, and that was really important to me, and a way that I saw just God, make that real for me.
Okay, well, Josiah was the medical grunt man, right? You have any stories you want to tell, buddy?
Yeah, so I like prep needles, and sometimes I check blood pressure. Mostly I was a pharmacist. I don't really know why you need a degree for that. It wasn't that hard. Yeah, so people it was like gave me a slip of paper, and I was like, here's your drugs, it fixes this. Anyways, yeah, so I gave out suckers to little kids. Yeah, that's about all I did.
You did a lot of setup and breakdown. You loaded the suitcases for us on top of the car.
I did that. That sounds terrible. Yeah, I could speak a little Spanish, so like the little kids would come up and talk to me, and I could talk back to them. But then they thought I was fluent sometimes, and that never worked out because.
You did community engagement. You guys went and played basketball.
Yeah, but
don't get too far ahead. That's coming.
Oh. Okay.
But one of my favorite memories was after the clinic I got really sick with Ann, but I don't know what it was. It was terrible, but I was like bettering and shaking. And then everyone was trying to find me medicines, and I was sitting in the van, and then the host family just comes over, and everyone else is like looking for medicine and stuff, and they just start praying for me. I was like, we should try this first.
I looked over at the van, and we're looking for medicine, and I see they're all like gathered around with their hands laid on him, and they're all praying for him in the back of the van. Like, why didn't we think of that?
That's about it.
Well, before we move on beyond the clinics, does anybody have any more clinic stuff they want to talk about? No? So beyond the clinics, this was really cool for me to observe this team do, but we tried to live on mission throughout the entire trip, not just the 3 clinic days. I'm going to show you a picture. Now, this was at the clinic, but the clinic was over. Some of us were resting, some of us were eating, some of us were packing up, but this, and I shared this on Facebook, but this might be my favorite picture from the trip. Gordon was presented an opportunity to share the gospel with a young girl, and here he is sharing the gospel. The clinic was done, but the Lord presented him with an opportunity. If you notice, there's an older lady standing behind him who is just as engaged. And so I was really proud of this team. There are other ways. Chris, Liz, and I had an opportunity to start to share the gospel while we were shopping on the last day. But then on Sunday night, we had a pretty special opportunity. We went out to eat. By that point, some of us were already starting to feel bad. We had ordered a ton of food. And Alejandra, which was the daughter of Ubaldo and Elida, and the sister of Giovanni, she had an idea of taking the food to the hospital, and I'm going to have Chris and Liz talk about that experience.
I'll start, but I'll let you finish. So I'm going to start this very shortly, but I'm going to let Liz finish. So piggybacking off of what Ann said with the local church, these guys do not, it's not just they say it, they live out what they are preaching and telling us and showing us. It's not just, okay, we're doing the clinic, and then it's, entertain the Americans and vacation after that. When we had this extra food, they said, okay, we're going to go down to the hospital and hand this food out. And it wasn't part-time. It was, they were on mission the entire time. To see how hard they worked, it was encouraging to me, and I know to all of us. And like for Giovanni, he was never off. I mean, he was working the entire time because he was translating for us. But I'll let you start the.
So you see the pictures there. This is one of those things, like we had been down to just across the border in Mexico in Matamoros back in, I think it was 2014, with Steve Smith doing an eyeglass clinic. So we kind of had an idea what to expect in general. This was something that completely, it floored me. So when you take your loved one to the hospital down there, you are not allowed to go in with them. They meet you at the door and take them in to care for them, and you sit outside in a courtyard like this. It is an open courtyard. There's not seating. It's not covered. You are sitting out there in the heat, the rain, and whatever other elements. The doctor may come out once a day to update you on how your loved one's doing, but if they're busy, they may not. And so some of these people may sit out there for days and weeks at a time, and they don't want to leave the courtyard to go get food or anything because they may miss the doctor. So we went and we were passing out these containers of food, and we got the opportunity to speak with some of them. The first gentleman that we spoke with, his wife was there. He was there with his wife. She has leukemia. And so he's sitting out there waiting, not knowing what's going on with her, not being able to be in there with her and comfort her and just be with her. And the second lady that we talked to, she was out there with one of her daughters. Her other daughter was inside. Her daughter that was inside is now 19, but when she was 4 years old, she started having a lot of neurological issues, seizures, memory issues, and it had only gotten worse as she got older. A lot of you know the issues that Chris has with the headaches, and we joke the Swiss cheese for memory. So we were able to speak to her a little bit about, we understand that you get frustrated, because the doctors couldn't tell her why it was happening. They did tell her that it was only going to continue to get worse, and she voiced that she was concerned and fearful about what was going to happen to her daughter when she was no longer there, who was going to care for her. And again, she had already been there for 2 or 3 days. She's sitting outside just waiting, not knowing what's going on. And the reason she originally took her daughter there was because she started having a seizure that didn't stop. So just to be able to talk to this woman and share with her, we understand the frustrations, the anger, the questions that you have, and you don't have answers. And by the end of it, all of us were crying. And we were able to pray with them and, hopefully give her a little bit of comfort and
encourage her to seek out her church family.
Yeah, encouraged her to, seek out her church family, and lean on them and open up to them and share this burden with them. And afterwards, we all kind of, and there were several of us that were going around doing the same thing and talking to different people. But we all came back together in the middle, and then all of a sudden, just people started coming up to us and telling us who they were there with and what was going on, and asking us to pray for them. So it was one of those moments that was so heartbreaking and so eye-opening, the things that we don't even know to be grateful for. And, we talk about in different areas, if you don't know, you don't know. And so this was one of those things that I didn't know, and I was so unprepared emotionally for that I couldn't do anything but just sit there and cry and just be heartbroken for these people. I can't even imagine having to sit outside and wait and not know what's going on with your loved one. So, yeah.
Did you have anything you want to add, Chris?
I don't know really what to add other than God was there that night. It was just we went down there for the eyeglass clinic and expecting that, and we were sick at that time. I think about
A lot of us were.
a lot of us. We almost did not go to the hospital because of how bad we personally, Liz and I, were feeling that night. But we pushed through it because we were only there for those 7 days. And it just makes me think back to, had we not gone, we would have missed that opportunity to see it. It wasn't for us, but to see God work. We would have not been able to witness that. And so it's given me encouragement for those times when I don't want to do something, to push through it, because I don't know what I'm missing that God might do that I wouldn't see if I don't push through it. And forgive me for piggybacking off of that, because I'll forget if I don't. When we were down there, those were the hottest, longest, hardest days, and then getting sick on top of that and being miserable. And I would do it again in a heartbeat. And on the plane ride home, we were both talking about, I cannot wait to go back again, even though I was miserable, I was in pain. It was all worth it, and I would do it again in a heartbeat, knowing everything.
Yeah, and just adding to what Chris said, at that point, me and Bree were pretty sick too, and I remember because they were offering, one vehicle was going back to the hotel, and then the rest of them were going to pass the food out, and I just remember we were talking about it because we wanted to go to the hotel, but it was trying to remember why we were there, and what the reason we went was to serve, and they say the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. and we were pretty weak at that point, and we really wanted to go to that hotel, but we knew that we'd regret it, like Chris said, missing out on what God had called you to do, and go down there and proclaim His word, and just to pass that food out and to pray with them people. I remember when we first announced we were going to pray for them, not very many people came forward. It was kind of like they were prideful at first, but then that first lady came forward, and after that it just kind of trickled more and more, kept coming and wanted prayer. And I just remember in my head, I was like, I got to pray for one of these people. And I had finally worked up the courage to go over there and do it. And then I hear Afton's voice go, so I was like, all right, I'll get the next one. That was probably one of the specialist moments of the whole trip, where you see God moving in a way that you just can't explain. You just had to be there.
Okay. Go ahead.
Jesus, the medical student, said one thing at the end of that night, and it challenged me too, because he said, I have gone into these hospitals so many times, but we go through a different door that's just for the doctors and the people who work here, and we never see what people actually go through. And he said, it makes me want to be a better doctor. And he says, I've never been out here and stood with the families and seen what they're suffering through, and it makes me think about how I treat patients. And it kind of did the same thing to me, that we saw a lot of times we can isolate ourselves and we shut out the spiritual needs of the people we're seeing, and focus on the physical. But it was really good to get in that other position and see what they're going through, and there's so much more than just the physical, the needs that are out there.
So another way that these young ones served the entire trip, they were trying to strike up a basketball game with some of the locals, and they finally did that. So Afton and Joe, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, they cheat at basketball in Mexico. We didn't know that, so we got our butts kicked at first. They play half-court basketball, but they don't take the ball back to half court. So you just rebound it and throw it right back up there. We didn't know that, so we looked terrible at first, but...
I was just told, Joe, that there's several Mexicans watching right now, so thanks for insulting them. And thanks for watching.
Cheaters. But anyways, so once we figured that out, we kind of got way better. It was me and Afton and this one Mexican guy on our team. We made an okay team, but the other team was pretty good until we figured them out, and then we beat them, and I hit a crazy shot. And do we have that video? You will see that next Sunday. Anyways, I don't know.
Afton, you want to make this more spiritual?
Yeah, hop on that, Afton.
So, to translate to you guys, we didn't want to just show up, do the clinic, and get out of there. It was important to all of us that we not only build connections there, but just everywhere we were, talking to people with what little Spanish we knew or picked up along the way, just building connections and building friendships. And we really built some friendships down there. Like Jill said, keeping in contact with people. I think for a lot of us, it's going to be lifelong friends that we made down there. And so one day, we had a little bit of free time before dinner, and so a group of us went on a walk to a local park, and Josiah was in my ear the whole trip. We need to go play basketball. We need to go play basketball. And I was like, we're at the clinic. We don't have time to play basketball right now. We saw the basketball court, and there was, I think, 3 teams of people playing 3-on-3. And so I imagine for them, they just saw these 2 young American guys strutting over to their basketball court. I think based on their reactions, I think their standards were a little high for us. Josiah may have met those standards, but I don't think I did. But yeah, like you could see them kind of like nudging each other and laughing. They were ready to show us what's up. And they were pretty good, but like Josiah said, we represented our country pretty well in the end.
We had a whole crowd cheering for us, actually.
Yeah, we had a fan section, so it was pretty cool. And we got to talk with our teammate because he knew a little bit of English, and so he was asking us about our life, and we asked him a little bit about his, and it's just those small things, interacting with people, talking to shop owners that we really didn't want to miss out on. So,
thank you. So one thing I want to talk about is we helped get ready for our clinic that's going to take place in 2 weeks. On our setup day, one of our responsibilities was putting glasses in all of these boxes, and we didn't really have time to stop to ask exactly what we were doing, but we figured it out on Sunday when we were doing this exercise. So we gave away 600 pair of eyeglasses. Well, they want to start every clinic with 500. So we needed to inventory 600 additional pair of glasses that the next team on their setup day will load in their boxes before they start their clinic. But that just goes to show you...
5,000. You said 500.
I meant 5,000. 5,000 pair of glasses, yes. But that just goes to show how many pair of glasses, how many people touch a single pair of glasses before they even get to the clinic. So a lot of you here helped wash glasses downstairs. Before they got to us, the prescription was read and all this other stuff. Larry could tell us how many people touch a single pair of glasses before it gets to a person, but it's a lot. And so we helped get ready for this next clinic. That's just another way we help serve the kingdom. Before I move on, any questions? Any quick comments? No? All right, so let's talk statistics. It's important to emphasize that our hope and our trust is firmly in Jesus, not in numbers. Numbers should never overshadow nor lessen our unwavering trust in Jesus. However, numbers can serve as a valuable tool for us. They can help us measure our impact. We can't ignore numbers, whether they reflect attendance, whether they reflect the Bibles that were given away, whether they reflect salvations. We can't ignore them because ultimately those numbers represent souls that were touched by God's grace. Each number is a life, each number is a story, and each number is a soul. And in the particular case of this clinic, we have a great reason to rejoice and celebrate in the work that God has done. So here are the numbers. There were 612 people who came to the eyeglass clinic. There were 248 who came to the medical clinic, bringing the total attendance in the medical and eyeglass clinics to 860 people. We gave away 674 pair of eyeglasses. We gave away 140 Bibles, and then this is the number you all want to see. There were 465 decisions for Christ. Now, Mike referenced this morning. As he was talking, I was whispering to my wife, "Be quiet, be quiet, be quiet." The percentage of salvations compared to total attendance at this clinic was unheard of. This clinic, it was 54% compared to normally it's 20%. And so Larry asked the question to a man named Rogelio. Rogelio was part of the evangelism team, and Larry asked him why was this one so different. And this is what he said. He said that for the past 4 months, Pastor Eduardo and the local workers would meet every Wednesday for prayer and fasting. And they would pray for the people who would attend the clinic, the local people who would be attending, that their souls would be saved. He said that they would pray for us, for the missionaries who are coming down to assist. They would pray for the finances. They would pray that the authorities would provide their approval, and that was a very big deal. Particularly the Catholic Church down there condemns eyeglass clinics when Christians come down to run them. We don't have time to explain all of that, but they typically tell their people that bad things will happen if they come to this eyeglass clinic, but that did not happen for this one. And they would also pray that everything would go smooth. And of course, we were praying too, and God answered those prayers clearly in great and mighty ways. At the start of the service, I told you that we were eagerly anticipating something simply by the atmosphere of the grounds on the first day that we stepped foot there. We didn't know what that something was until later, but we clearly see it was the result of much prayer on behalf of many people. God heard the prayers of his children and of his saints, and he answered those prayers in great and mighty ways. So, there was a question, were cell phones a part of their daily lives? My guess is no, but hey, you never know. We were surprised by the number of phones that we saw. Yes, they were a part of their daily lives.
Oh, very much.
Yeah.
Everyone had this cell phone.
So this is a little bit of space. Does anybody have any questions that they, Larry? How did the word spread so far to get so many people? So Larry worked very closely with the church plant that we were assisting, and they did most of the legwork. I don't have the picture. I'll try to post it on Facebook, but we were walking down kind of the main road, which has a whole bunch of shops in the city that we were staying, and we saw one of our flyers. And so they were posting flyers. They were going around talking to people. So there was a vinyl billboard type thing on the road that from the main highway to the dirt road to go to Lariah. So yeah. Any other questions? I think someone. What will you do differently or bring with you next time to be even more effective? More doctors.
Here's your chance. Doctors, nurses, from a medical perspective.
Imodium.
Yeah, Imodium maybe, yeah, yes. We will, probiotics.
I will, on the doctor front, we were all very grateful we had doctors with us on the trip.
I actually have that covered.
Yes, exactly. We're good. We can, I think, we can use a lot more people. So I'm speaking from the medical side, which is maybe a little bit different from the eyeglass side in some respects. But if we would just take even one more nurse, Susan, I'm looking at you, and a couple more providers, which we probably could get access to. We could double that number that we saw of 248, because I saw all 248 of those patients initially. So even with one more nurse, we could double that number of the patients that we're seeing in a day. I think Bill and I have a way better idea of what we need to take in terms of setting up the clinic for the next time. We were able to leave a lot of stuff down there that we plan to use next summer, but we have a better idea, I think, of what diseases that they're going to be seeing and treating. We would very much like a registered pharmacist to come with us. That would be fabulous.
You're going to get beat up.
Yes, but yes, you can. I will tell you that because of, like I said, we saw a large number of people, I couldn't do assessments in the way I might normally do those in a clinic and be as fast about it. So I had a person that was a translator / blood pressure taker with an automatic machine. If you can press a button, you can do that job. We had another person that did glucose checks on people. If you just can't be squeamish for that one. But you can be trained to do a lot of things. Josiah has no formal education, as you can see here, but just such a humble heart. But
anyone can pick it up.
Yes. But was willing to serve. There are so many ways that we need people to serve down there. So,
I would like to mention one thing about the food. Yes, there are a lot of us got sick, but the Mexicans that were there with us also got sick. So
yes.
We got into something, and it affected almost all of us. So it wasn't just that we weren't used to it, because we ate a lot of really good.
Yeah, the food was
really
fantastic.
Amazing food.
Lenore?
We did have to, I think, cut off the medical side after we'd get down to where there'd be like a couple hours of clinic left, and there was a long line, so which was sad. I wish we could have, that's why it would be nice to have another provider. I mean, we saw 250 people in 2.5 days, which normally I see like, if I see this, 18 to 20 a day, and it's pretty busy. The nice thing is you don't have to chart, which makes it a whole lot easier. But yeah, we were seeing a lot of patients, and we were working hard all day, and if we'd have had another provider, we could have seen a lot more. I think some of them did. I remember this one elderly couple. I mean, I think they were probably in their late 70s, but they said, the lady said, I got her in, and then I got her husband in, and they said, they're shutting down the eyeglass clinic. They said this to a translator. We're shutting down the eyeglass clinic. We came here by canoe, and it took us 3 hours, and we really can't come back tomorrow. Is there any way we can get some eyeglasses? And so there were some people that came a long way, and that's why I hope no one got turned away because of that. Most of those people came early in the morning, though. Those people had stood there all day long and then finally got in at the end of the day.
I think, Nathan, do you talk about at some point, like the money that we raised, how that is used in the village, like to pay people to cook and, you know, do all those things?
Yeah, so in our fee, which it cost us around $2,000 to go per person, in that fee is support for the village to pay for our food that they wouldn't have typically needed to pay for had we not been there.
Yeah. And I think some of the women were paid a fee to cook to bring in some income that they may not otherwise have. So we're going back economically and providing some support to those local women who, some of them certainly would have done it without ever being paid, but it provides them a way to pay to, you know, help with their family's income. Translators I know were paid. My translator was somebody who had been deported back to Mexico, actually, and was talking to me about the changes he'd made in his life about getting sober and just growing closer to Jesus. And so I really think that being a part of that clinic was kind of an outreach to him as well. So we were touching people's lives who came to the clinic. They were touching our lives as well. But I think we also, God, you know, was using us to touch the other workers, if that makes sense, in terms of, you know, just speaking to them, speaking to those people.
So for the sake of time, I'm going to close questions. If you have questions that weren't answered, please come see us. I anticipate some of you wondering what the future of missions looks like at West Haven. Well, we are going back to Mexico. Unless the Lord closes that door and shuts down that opportunity, we will be going back to Mexico next year. Mike and I are meeting with Larry Mary on Wednesday to talk about what not just next year looks like, but a strategic partnership with Vision 316. So we hope to have more details on that by mid to late October. But here's what you can be doing now. If you want to go, or if you want to support somebody to go, you can start budgeting for that now. It cost us around $2,000 per person to go. That's what I would budget. Now, of course, everything is going up in cost, so you might want to budget more than that, but $2,000 might be a good starting point. The other thing you can do is pray. Pray that God would give you wisdom on if you should go or if you should send. And be praying for the clinics that's going to be taking place in 2 weeks, as well as the clinics that are being planned for next year, because as we've seen, God answers prayer. And so on that note of going back to Mexico, we want you to hear from the team from Mexico.
Good afternoon, brothers in the States. God bless you all. My name is Ubaldo Roque Ramirez, pastor of the church in El Rodeo, Arroyo Pepesca, and I want to share with you about the clinic that we just had in La Raya, Soyaltepec. To me, it was an excellent clinic, a wonderful clinic in which God worked in an amazing way. I believe that if it weren't because of God and without your help, who are willing to sacrifice and suffer because of the gospel, none of this would be possible. I want to invite you to not just this time you guys come, but many more times, so you have the courage to come. A lot of people were changed through eyeglasses. A lot of people gave their life to Jesus because of a pair of eyeglasses. I believe it's worth the effort and sacrifice that each of you make. Seeing the faces of those people with a smile, with joy, emotion in them, it's more than enough to know that they are thankful. And they are already waiting for us to go back to their community. And I know that not just in La Raya there is need, physically or spiritually, but in so many more communities here in Mexico. But talking about that clinic, it's been a clinic in which we have seen God's glory manifested in people's lives. The amount of people who gave their life to Christ, and I believe that that is going to bring a lot of harvest to the pastors to which we had the clinic with. God bless you all. We love you, and we want to see you again back here in Mexico. Blessings to all of you, and greetings to all of the churches in the United States. Thank you.
God bless you, brothers and sisters. I'm here to thank you for coming to these regions of Tuxtepec to bless so many people. For us, it was admirable what God did in this clinic that we just had in August. For us, in every clinic that we have, there's challenges, there's obstacles, but we could see God's hand and the trust that the people would have in us in the clinic. We have done clinics in other places in which we have advertised, and the people are afraid of what we offer. It's not true for their lives. In the community of La Raya, we could see the trust and the interest that was in the people, and overall, how we were able to provide of that need spiritually and physically. We saw the harvest, we saw the fruit of what God did in this clinic. So many souls receiving Jesus. It was amazing to us. It was something that we have seen in very few clinics, but the people were expecting with an open heart to the gospel. And many of them, I know they had changes, great changes in their lives. They were just not able to see, but the word of God, the salvation, changed radically their lives. We are waiting that in this clinic that we had, the harvest is great. Thank you to all the volunteers that have come. The elevated temperatures, the bad weather was not an obstacle for you guys. Thank you very much for being part of this ministry. Thank you for coming to those who need it the most. We are willing to join you, to keep joining you, to serve God, and to reach souls for the kingdom of our Lord Jesus Christ. God bless you, my brothers, and we are truly blessed by everything you are doing and for everything you're planting.
Hello, West Haven. Hello, guys. Nice to see you again. You're seeing me, but I'm not seeing you. But anyway, it's good to see you again. It's good to speak to you again, guys. I am Giovanni Roque. For those who don't know me, I am the son of the people that just spoke before me. They are my lovely parents, and I am really happy to share what I have in mind with you, because just like when God used my life to speak in your church, because I was in your church once and I spoke to you, He can use your life too to change so many lives. And all the glory is always to God. It's not to me. He could have used any other person, but God gave us the privilege to be his servants and work for him and do his will. So the team that just came, I believe that they experienced what it's like to serve a living God, what it's like to serve and help your neighbor who is in need. And I believe that their lives were changed. So I want to encourage you, church, the rest of you guys, to go ahead and do what God has called us to do, which is to share of his kingdom, to share the gospel. Not just to sit every Sunday at church, which is very comfortable under the AC, but down here we have some very hot temperatures, and it's not a very nice bed in which we lay down. But the greatest reward is when we're going to be in heaven serving him and worshiping God, our creator, the one who told us to go and share of that love that he gave us with our neighbor. So I'm encouraging you through this video to keep doing what you're doing, to keep serving the Lord with all of your heart. And from the bottom of my heart, I'm telling you, serve the Lord with everything you have. If God has called you to do something that you don't want to do, or he has called you to go where you don't want to go, I'm sorry, buddy. I'm sorry, my friend. I'm sorry, my brother, my sister. But we have to do it if it's his will, and we will do it for sure. God bless you. I love you with all my heart, and I hope to see you again, and I challenge you to come next year. God bless you guys. Bye.
So that's Giovanni. He is a dear brother and friend to all of us. I think he just sent me this message. I don't know. I don't have a name tied to it exactly, but we did get a message. Greetings from Mexico. May God encourage your church to preach the gospel in Mexico and the ones who came that keep coming and serving the Lord with all their hearts. So thank you, brothers and sisters, for sending that message. Mike?
90-second story, and then I'll be done. I've known Larry Mary for 19 years, and I was praying with him one morning in 2004. He was an executive with Ameren UE in Missouri. And when we got done praying, I said, Larry, is there any chance you're called to missions? He said, I get 7 weeks off a year. I make good money. I do missions in those 7 weeks, and he did. And he said, I'm going to retire as soon as I can, and I'm going to give the rest of my life to the Lord. That's an example of how to do it. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on that. And I'm also glad to know that Dr. Josiah has his pharmaceutical degree, because instead of calling Bill for renewing scripts, I'll just call you. So thank you all for coming.
So we're gonna close in just a minute. Robert, a little bit ago, he mentioned a verse from Luke chapter 12. From everyone who has been given much, much will be required, and to whom they entrusted much, of him they will ask all the more. You only have to go to Mexico once to know that we've been entrusted by God with many abilities, with many resources, and with many responsibilities, and we will be held to a higher standard on the last day. We have been blessed with much so that we may bless others with much. And I've been imagining that day when I meet Jesus face to face. I tell you what, I want to be able to stand before my King and say that I used my entire life, everything he's given us, my money, my resources for his kingdom. I don't want to use my resources on things that have no eternal value. Listen, I'm excited to return to Mexico. Seriously, I can't wait. I hope you'll join with me, but don't wait for Mexico to live on mission. Instead, let's live every day for God's kingdom. Let's use the lessons we've learned, the lessons we've heard, to ignite a fire in our hearts to live for his glory, to live a life of purpose and service every day. We have been called to steward the gifts that God has given us, to be Christ's ambassadors wherever we are. Our faith is not a passive faith, but it's a call to action. It's driven by love and it's compassion. It's driven by love and compassion for those who do not know Jesus. When we look forward to Mexico, when we look forward to any mission field, it should be a reminder that we are on a mission right here already. Every encounter, every gesture of kindness, every opportunity to share the love of Christ is an opportunity, is a mission field in and of itself. And so let's leave this service not merely with the memories and the lessons of our time in Mexico, but to live on mission, to be the hands and feet of Jesus in our everyday lives. And may our unwavering mission be to see people saved, lives changed, and Jesus glorified. Knowing that with the blessings he has given us, much will be expected of us. And so live on mission today and every day, and it's also okay to eagerly anticipate going to Mexico next year. I certainly am. Would you stand with me? To close this gathering, I would like for us to sing the doxology together. Praise God. Heavenly Father, we thank you. We rejoice in the many great things that you have done in and through us in our trip to Mexico. I pray that as we leave this place, we would be emboldened to live every moment of every day for your kingdom. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen. Thanks, guys.